In 1960, the Royal Air Force loaded 23 cats into wicker baskets, strapped the baskets to parachutes, and dropped them from 400 feet into one of the most remote villages on the island of Borneo. The cats were not pets. They were weapons. And the enemy they were sent to fight had already destroyed the village's food supply, was spreading disease, and had only become a problem because of a well-intentioned decision made by the World Health Organization 5 years earlier. What those 23 cats did after they hit the ground solved the crisis in a single month. But to understand why anyone would parachute cats into a jungle, you have to understand what went wrong first. The village of Bario sits at 1,100 meters above sea level in the highlands of Sarawak, a Malaysian state on the northern coast of the island of Borneo. It is one of the most isolated communities in Southeast Asia. In 1960, there were no roads leading to Bario. The only way in or out was by air, a small twin-otter plane from the coastal city of Miri, or a military supply drop. The Kelabit people who live in the highlands are one of the smallest indigenous groups in Malaysia. They have cultivated wet rice in these mountain valleys for centuries, using water from surrounding streams to irrigate their paddies. The grain they grow, Bario rice, is famous across the region for its sweet aroma and soft texture. It was, and still is, their most important crop. The Kelabit traditionally lived in longhouses, large communal wooden structures with open hearths for warmth in the cool highland air, housing dozens of families under a single roof. Life in Bario revolved around the rice cycle, the forest, and the community. It was remote, it was quiet, and in the early 1950s, it had a serious problem: malaria. Malaria was killing people across Borneo. The disease is transmitted through the bites of infected female Anopheles mosquitoes, and in the tropical lowlands and highlands of Sarawak, mosquitoes were everywhere. In May of 1955, the 8th World Health Assembly met in Mexico City and agreed on an ambitious global malaria eradication program. The weapon of choice was a chemical called DDT, dichlorodiphenyltrichloroethane. It was cheap, effective, and lethal to mosquitoes on contact. The plan was straightforward. Spray DDT on the interior walls and surfaces of homes. When a mosquito lands on a treated surface, it absorbs the chemical and dies before it can bite anyone. Between 1952 and 1955, malaria control teams sprayed DDT twice a year inside the large thatched roof longhouses of Sarawak. Some of these buildings housed up to 100 families. The results were dramatic. The percentage of local mosquitoes carrying the malaria parasite plummeted from 35.6% to 1.6% in just 2 years. Malaria cases dropped. People stopped dying. The WHO had, by every conventional measure, succeeded. But DDT did not just kill mosquitoes. The first sign of trouble was the roofs. Across villages in Sarawak, thatched roofs began deteriorating and collapsing. Investigators eventually discovered why. The DDT had killed a species of parasitic wasp that normally kept caterpillar populations in check. With the wasps gone, a type of moth larvae that feeds on thatch exploded in number. The caterpillars devoured the roofing from the inside out. Homes that had stood for years began falling apart. The second chain of consequences was worse. Cockroaches and other insects that survived inside the sprayed longhouses absorbed DDT into their bodies. Small geckos, the common house lizards found on the walls of nearly every home in tropical Borneo, ate those contaminated insects. The geckos accumulated DDT in their tissues with every meal, and the cats ate the geckos. Cats in Borneo, like cats everywhere, are opportunistic hunters. They chased and ate the sluggish geckos that were loaded with DDT. They also groomed themselves constantly, licking their fur after lying on surfaces coated with DDT. Both routes delivered poison directly into their systems. DDT attacks the nervous system. The cats began dying. With the cats gone, the rats had no natural predator. In the tropical highlands of Borneo, rats breed fast. Within months, the rat population around Bario and other villages exploded. They swarmed the rice stores, they gnawed through the crops in the paddies, they invaded the longhouses. The rice harvest that the Kelabit depended on for survival was being destroyed. The World Health Organization had come to Borneo to stop one disease and had accidentally triggered a chain reaction that now threatened the food supply and raised the risk of new diseases carried by rats, including typhus and plague. The village needed cats, and it needed them fast. On March 9, 1960, a classified-style advertisement appeared in the Straits Times, an English-language newspaper based in Singapore. It read, "Wanted, 30 flying cats to rout rats." The appeal went out to the city of Kuching, the capital of Sarawak. Kuching is a fitting origin for this story. The word Kuching means cat in Malay, and the city is known to this day as the City of Cats. Cat statues line its streets. A cat museum sits at its center. The people of Kuching answered the call, but fell short of the target. They gathered 23 cats. It would have to be enough. The Royal Air Force assigned the mission to No. 48th Squadron. The aircraft selected was a Blackburn Beverley, the largest transport plane in the Royal Air Force at the time. It was a hulking, box-shaped freighter with 4 radial engines, originally designed to drop paratroopers and heavy equipment onto rough airstrips. It could carry up to 44,000 pounds of cargo. On this particular mission, it would carry 7,000 pounds of supplies, including an 800-pound vibrator roller for compacting soil, vegetable seeds, 4 cartons of stout for a recuperating village chieftain, and 23 cats packed expertly into wicker baskets and attached to parachutes. Flying Officer Nimmo piloted the Beverley over the Kelabit highlands and the remote drop zone at Bario. The crew made 5 test passes over the zone before beginning the drop. Then, from a height of 400 feet, they released the cargo. The entire operation took more than an hour. Hundreds of Kelabit villagers watched from the ground as parachutes blossomed in the sky over the highlands and crates of supplies and cats drifted down into the valley. John Seal, the operations officer of the Sarawak Civil Aviation Department, was on the ground to observe. He congratulated the RAF on what he called a magnificent job. The cats landed directly in the center of the drop zone. Every single one survived. A message was sent back from Bario shortly after the drop. It was addressed to the RAF and came from a man identified in the squadron records as Mr. McSpomran. It read, "Many thanks to the RAF and all responsible for airdrop arrangements. Also to cat donors and cat basket makers. All cats safe and much appreciated." The cats were released into the village and went to work immediately. They were doing what cats do, hunting, stalking, and killing the rats that had overrun the rice stores, the longhouses, and the surrounding paddies. 1 month later, on April 18, 1960, a second message arrived from the Kelabit Highlands. It was brief. It read, "Thanks for the cats. No more trouble with rats and mice." 23 cats had solved in 4 weeks what the World Health Organization's chemical intervention had accidentally caused over 5 years. Operation Cat Drop was not the first time the RAF had delivered feline reinforcements to remote outposts in the region. In December of 1953, a single cat was flown to Fort Legap in Perak, Malaya, after rats had been eating the soldiers' rations. In June of 1954, 2 cats, one black, one white, were parachuted from an RAF Valletta at 350 feet over an airfield near Kuala Lumpur as a test run. The officer who opened the container reported that both cats seemed quite jolly about the whole thing. They jumped out, licked their paws, and walked away. But it was not always a success story. In 1965, during the Indonesia-Malaysia confrontation known as Konfrontasi, Australian troops of the 3rd Battalion Royal Australian Regiment stationed in Sarawak requested 5 cats to deal with large rats overrunning their position. The cats were obtained from the Kuching Veterinary Department and airdropped in. The Straits Times reported the grim outcome. The 5 cats had been killed by the large and aggressive rats. The Sarawak Tribune suggested the military try tame pythons instead, recognized Sarawak rodent exterminators. The RAF base in Labuan responded with practical advice. Any military unit throwing cats into action against border rats should get them in peak condition first by feeding them well. They pointed to a grey and brown tabby named Mum as proof. Mum had been living in the officers' mess on Labuan, eating chicken, beef, mutton, and fish. When an SOS came from a unit in Bario requesting a cat, Mum and her 3 kittens were sent by helicopter. The foursome were reported to be more than holding their own against overwhelming odds. Not all cats were eager for combat. In June of 1966, the Straits Times reported that 2 tomcats recruited by the 4th Battalion Royal Australian Regiment to reduce the bush rat population had gone absent without leave less than an hour into their deployment. The newspaper noted that Army authorities said if the cats turned up, they faced a cat martial with a maximum sentence of 14 days confined to baskets and a ratless diet of rice and fish heads. The story of Operation Cat Drop became famous far beyond Borneo. In February of 1962, 2-time Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times correspondent Homer Bigart opened a dispatch from Vietnam with a sentence that read, like a nursery rhyme gone wrong. He wrote, "American DDT spray killed the cats that ate the rats that devoured the crops that were the main props against communist agitation in the central lowlands. The same chain of unintended consequences, DDT, dead cats, exploding rat populations, destroyed harvests, was playing out across Southeast Asia." That same year, 1962, American biologist Rachel Carson published Silent Spring, a landmark book that documented the devastating ecological effects of pesticides, including DDT. Carson argued that chemicals like DDT do not simply eliminate their target species and disappear. They accumulate. They move through food chains. They kill things no one intended to kill. The book launched the modern environmental movement and directly contributed to the eventual ban on DDT for agricultural use in the United States in 1972. The Borneo cat drop became one of the most cited examples of what scientists now call cascading ecological failure, or more simply, the law of unintended consequences. You spray a chemical to kill mosquitoes. The chemical also kills the wasps that eat caterpillars. The caterpillars eat your roof. The chemical poisons the geckos. The cats eat the geckos. The cats die. The rats take over. And before you know it, you are loading cats into wicker baskets and dropping them from a military transport plane at 400 feet, because that is the only way to undo what you started. The Calebit people of Bario still grow their famous rice in the cool highland valleys of Sarawak. The longhouses still stand. The paddies still flood each season with clean mountain water. And the cats, the descendants of those 23 parachuting pioneers from Kuching and every generation that followed, still patrol the village. The malaria is largely controlled now through methods far more targeted than blanket DDT spraying. The roofs no longer collapse, the rats are kept in check. But the lesson of Operation Cat Drop has outlived the operation itself. It is taught in university ecology courses, cited in systems thinking textbooks, and referenced in public health journals to this day. A reminder that in nature, nothing works in isolation. Pull one thread and the whole fabric moves. Kill the mosquito and you might lose the cat. Lose the cat and you might lose the rice. Lose the rice and you have to call in the Royal Air Force with a plane full of parachutes and wicker baskets. 23 cats from the city of cats, dropped from 400 feet into a highland valley most people have never heard of. And they did exactly what cats have always done. They hunted, they killed, and they saved the harvest.